Hello, this is David Bernstein. I'm the founder of the Jewish Institute for Liberal Values, and this is the Jewish Contrarians podcast. I'm with my usual partner in thought crime, Brandy Shafatinsky. Hello, Brandy.
Hey, David.
We are here to talk about this debacle on Capitol Hill about with the presidents of universities. I know many of you watched that and probably cringed at what was happening, probably were outraged at what was happening. I was more in the cringe category. And maybe that's because I've been so pre-outraged about all this for so long, and I've sort of known what was in the pipeline. And so by the time it came, I was just watching with this sense of resignation. It was to me like, and I wrote about this, watching a episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm where that tragic figure, Larry David, who's always possessed with some small thing, some small obsession, goes about and runs into when he brings that ridiculous obsession to the real world and around other people, he turns everybody off in the process and fails in the eyes of polite society. That's what I felt like when I was watching these university presidents who I know have this crazy idea about who's oppressed and who's oppressor, because it reflects what got them hired in the first place. It's the ideology that got them hired in the first place in these institutions of higher learning. And I know that as soon as they bring that into a larger fora, into contact with mainstream sensibilities, with members of Congress, with the people who watch the hearings, that it had to go in that direction, that we were bound for a Larry David moment. And so as soon as Congresswoman Stefanik asked that penultimate question, do you think that calling for Jewish genocide violates your policies? I was like, okay, this is not going to be good. And of course, they didn't disappoint. They, right on cue, they went on this free speech rant that clearly, in my view, was not going to go anywhere. How could it? Because anybody who's been paying attention to campus, and that's probably literally every viewer who watched those hearings, knows that these campuses have been bastions of not free speech, but it's very opposite, of stifling speech. And the campuses that were represented, at least two of them, were dead last among those with free speech. According to the Fire survey, Harvard is last and Penn is second to last. So people know that these places have been anything but bastions of free speech, and you're trying to tell them that you're not going to call out genocide because you yourself are some great spokesperson for free speech. So it just didn't wash with anybody, and it shouldn't have washed with anybody. Now, we're going to talk about, is this a turning point? That's one question I'm going to have for Brandy. Is this a turning point? Just pocket that for a second, because I'm not done with my rant on this. What does it mean for us? Now, what I worry about here is that the Jewish community watching this in horror, in righteous indignation, will say, well, let's go ahead and, try to get Jews in the DEI narrative. Let's get Jews in the DEI bureaucracy. Or let's ourselves double down on speech codes so that we get part of that. Let's play the Oppression Olympics. Or let's do little things that might actually help in some cases. I'm not, I want campuses to protect Jewish students from certainly from violence. And I think that they have to implement their own policies, for God's sake. But what I'm worried about is that we'll take ourselves our eye off the prize, which is much more deeper structural reform that needs to be in these universities, or this is just going to be the gift that keeps on giving. What is that? Well, look, there's a postmodernist framework that has been around campus, post-colonial studies, all these absurd studies departments in universities. Now, people say, well, if you're calling for banning these studies departments at universities, aren't you engaging in censorship? And the answer is freaking no. No, we're not engaging in censorship. It's one thing if you had a single course taught by some kooky professor on UFOs and ufology, right? And you're teaching them about how alien life came to America. Okay, fine. You have that one approach. But if you're going to create a department of ufology, don't accuse me of censorship from saying that you're ridiculous. That's the problem. we've got to understand we've empowered nutty ideologies here, and that those nutty ideologies are causing us the problem of anti-Semitism. And we've got to start dismantling those programs, whether it's DEI bureaucracies or whether it's ethnic studies departments. That's a long-term proposition enterprise, and I can talk a little bit about how you do that. I think we should do it. I don't know if it'll work, but I want to try. I don't, and to me, that's what this moment has to mean for us. It has to mean going after the structures of the university so that we disempower these ideologies. Okay, Brandy, is this a turning point in this?
I'll be a little bit of a pessimist and say no. And one of the reasons is everyone's calling for the firing of these university presidents when, in all honesty, they're not the main problem. The main problem with the university is the faculty and, like you mentioned, the departments. And until those faculty and departments stop paying out, until they stop being lucrative, it's a business. They don't call it the grievance industry for no reason. Until that stops being financially and power-wise beneficial, I don't think that we're going to see a change. And I think that there are indicators of this already, because just, not even when we were at 2 months post October 7th, we already had people trying to make excuses for, well, if they only take these little measly steps, then okay, we'll forgive them. When in fact, what should have happened is every Jewish parent and non-Jewish parent who strives for scholarship for their kids should have pulled their kids immediately out of these institutions. That didn't happen. There has been a constant influx of parents willingly sending their children to these places and then being upset when they experience exactly what the institutions are set up and say that they're going to put out, and we're paying for it. I'm not concerned about the elite institutions as much as I'm concerned about the state universities and community colleges, where this is even worse. And we're not even focused on that. It's a great, big political and partisan boon to kind of drag these presidents of some elite institutions before Congress. But where's the head of, say, CUNY or the UCs or the Cal States? I don't see them mentioned. They get missed all the time.
Yeah. And these small liberal arts schools, by the way, that no one hears about, that can be even worse because they're even smaller echo chambers as well. I talked to a Jewish professor at a small liberal arts school, and he told a really scary tale about the environment on his campus where, he's just basically shouted down on a daily basis, and they're going after him for some very moderate Facebook posts that he made. So I think that it's a big problem in these places. I agree with you. It's in a lot of places where you wouldn't necessarily think. And so we're focused on Harvard and Penn and MIT, but it is in a lot of places. I don't know what percentage of 4,000 plus institutions of higher learning in this country we have this problem, but it's in enough where it has reached critical mass, and that it's happening in different places in different ways.
And not only in the studies departments, which is part of the problem, right? Because divisive DEI ideology kind of runs the show for which courses should be offered and which voices get to benefit from free speech policies. Because that's the case, this is happening in other departments as well, and again, in not only the elite institutions but state schools.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Now, I've been asked by Jewish parents a number of times, like, okay, should my kids not go to these schools? I just gave a talk in Miami this last week, and here's my answer. You may disagree with this. My answer is, who is your child? Okay. Is your child Noah Shifutinsky, your son, who was a great activist at George Washington University and is still a great activist now, helping other young activists become like him? Or is your son a quieter kid who's, going to be intimidated, or your daughter, by the way, a quieter kid who's going to be intimidated in such an environment? And I think if your kid is that quieter kid, I wouldn't send them. But I'm wary of taking the future Noah Shifinskys out of whatever Ivy League environment, because I want there to be somebody there to fight for it, somebody there to help others feel a sense of safety while they're there. So that's the struggle, the internal struggle. Am I wrong?
Yes. And not because I agree with you with wanting those kids there. I'm not going to pay for that. The parents' kids go tens of thousands, if not more, dollars into debt to pay for an institution that is not just going to turn a blind eye to the anti-Semitism they're experiencing from their peers, but they're actively participating in it. I don't think that as a parent we should be paying for that. We're paying for our kids to be subjected to this, because at the end of the day, that's the part that's the most problematic, that I have a problem with. Our kids are going to face bigots and anti-Semites and the rest. It's not that I think they need to be sheltered from every little thing that they face that's uncomfortable or even that's negative. It's the fact that now we're paying for it. And if we keep paying for it, we're supporting that institution.
Yeah. There was one very fired up mom, and I think she was talking about private schools, if I recall, in New York. I was at this meeting, who said, close your wallet and open your mouths. And I thought that was very good advice for parents. Whether or not you choose to go ahead and put your kid in the lion's den around Israel is I don't know, to me it's a tough decision. I don't know that these universities for the most part are going to disappear. Someone pointed out that the reason McGill got canned at Penn, but the universities, Harvard and MIT, didn't fire their presidents, is because Penn has a smaller endowment. And those universities had larger endowments and weren't as vulnerable to this sort of whims of these billionaire donors. But there's another school of thought I want to ask you about. I think I know where you come down on it, but I got to ask anyway. Peter Savodnik from the Free Press wrote a piece basically saying, look, he agrees with us. This is a big problem. He knows it's anti-Semitism. And he says, I worry that by firing McGill at Penn and getting them to double down on protecting Jewish students, that all they're going to really do is they're going to double down on their speech codes. They're going to double down on their lefty ideology, and they're just going to pledge to include Jews in it. And this is going to make things worse, not better. What do you think?
To me, it's not about making things worse or better. If somebody makes a mistake at the level that she made, that she no longer seems fit to serve the duties she was hired to serve, then that's why she should be let go. This isn't just punitive. There has to be also responsibility. And again, maybe this is one of the reasons it's important to consider merit when you're hiring somebody. Can they actually do the job? She demonstrated she couldn't, according to the people that wanted to see her fired, or that ultimately fired her. She wasn't up to the task. And that should be why she's let go, not because it's going to make things better or worse for Jewish students and faculty and staff on campus.
Yeah, but will it make things better or worse?
I don't think it's going to do either, honestly. I don't think that the firing of one person at a university is what it's going to take to make things better. This is a university that didn't take a stand against not just genocidal chants, because we can have an argument about free speech, hate speech, and harassment, but that didn't take a stand against and hasn't taken a stand against terrorist supporters holding a festival on their campus. The rot is deeper than one person.
Oh, there's no question. In fact, I think we have to understand that rot if we're going to create strategies that are meant to reverse it. Otherwise, we're just playing a game of whack-a-mole. So I wrote recently, and others have said something similar, that I think university presidents had two possible responses that would have gotten them off the hook. And I want to pose them to you. The first response would have gone like this. We're a campus that believes and values free speech. We realize that we have not done a good job of living up to that free speech value in our own work with other groups. We've too often deferred to sensitive voices on campus and squelched alternative views. And now, when here we are talking about free speech, we come across as hypocritical. I pledge to you today that is going to change at my university, and that you can have me back in a year or 2 years and you'll see the progress we've made, okay? That was one response. The other response was, our campus is one that doesn't believe in hate speech. We're a private university or what have you. We don't have to live up to the First Amendment all the time. We want to hold our people, our professors, our students accountable for not engaging in hate speech. We have not done a good job of that. We have not applied that policy equally in our universities. And we're going to start doing a better job of that. I apologize. Sorry. We're going to start doing a better job of that. So next time we hear a genocidal chant, we'll treat it just as we would if it were a racist tirade against Black and brown people. We will discipline those students and will prevent it from happening again. First of all, I have two questions. Do you think maybe even 3. Do you think that that would have gotten them off the hook if they said that? Should it have gotten off the hook? Maybe that's an ancillary question. And which one of those responses would you have preferred?
So would it have gotten them off the hook? Maybe. I think that one of the things people were outraged about watching the hearing was really not seeing them take any responsibility. It just seemed like, whatever, like it's not my job, or I don't care enough. That's how they came across, at least to me. Should it have gotten them off the hook? I think that it's important to understand that people will make mistakes, and if they have made a mistake, that in itself isn't an excuse to call for them to be fired if it's not egregious. But taking responsibility is necessary, and they didn't do that. Which one of those statements? I think maybe a bit of a hybrid. I'm not one for the chance, whether if they're not threats and don't cross that level of actually somebody vocalizing a threat, I wouldn't be one to come down on it. What's happened is this isn't just chance. Students are coming in and disrupting lectures. They're preventing students from accessing their classes. They're blocking the library. This goes far beyond chance. And I think it's important that those university presidents, which I don't know if it happened in the hearing because I didn't watch all of it, if they were actually made to address that, because this goes deeper than words. It already, to me, the context is they crossed the line from just speech to conduct, and they weren't held accountable for the conduct. In fact, I think it was at MIT that the president said she wasn't going to release the names or punish the students that actually crossed that line over conducts because she's concerned about their immigration status.
Yes. I think that's outrageous. Ilya Shapiro wrote an excellent piece in the Free Press about this, where he made that distinction between speech and conduct. We are not talking about speech when you accost another student. We're not talking about speech when you harass the student, when you follow them to their classes, or you focus your energies on one person and trying to discredit them and harass them. That's harassment. That's covered by Title VI of the Civil Rights Law. Civil Rights Act, 1964. So, and I think we have to understand that, and I think one thing that free speechers like me, by the way, I'm definitely a free speecher, sometimes get wrong in all this, is that this is a contest between not one value, free speech, but of two that are in tension with each other. There's the value of free speech, and there's the absolute imperative for equal protection. In other words, universities by law cannot treat discrimination and harassment of Jews differently than they do other minority groups. They are obliged to treat them equally. So what do I want them to do? Do I want them to side with equal protection, or do I want them to side with free speech? Ultimately with free speech. But in the meantime, you better apply your laws and policies equally, and you haven't done that yet.
And if they're demonstrating that they haven't, then someone else needs to, who's in charge. Yes. The safety of all students is the responsibility of not just the university, but elected leaders. And because this debate has really just focused on speech and free speech or hate speech or genocidal chants, we're not addressing the bigger threat, which is the conduct that's happened. And so far, how many Jewish students, faculty, and staff members have been physically accosted on campuses, and no one's doing anything to protect them? And that's where the equal protection comes in, because for other groups, we know this because it's happened before. Other people, leaders, had to step in and make sure that those students were safe.
Yes. And you've seen it. David French pointed out this in his very excellent column, I think, in the New York Times. He said, you can't hold Jewish students to, I'm paraphrasing here, you can't make Jewish students feel the brunt of free speech, and yet everybody else is treated with warmth in the bosom of the campus administration. And I think that's what we're the hypocrisy that we're pointing out. If this were a genocidal chant against anybody else, even if it wasn't that clear. By the way, most revolutionary chants like that, as someone pointed out recently, are always unclear or not exactly clear about their profession to violence. But this, and we know what it means. Like we've heard this around. We know the context in which it's said. Does that mean that there are some softies on campus, progressives, who really don't know what it means and think it's just this lovely chant? I'm sure there are probably a lot of them, but we know that what the activist class means by this, and I think the universities should at least at least make sure that it's not done in a physically harassing way. And they haven't done that. They haven't lived up to that.
Well, I think part of that too, though, David, is like people have focused on the "From the River to the Sea" chant, ignoring that it's always coupled with globalize the Intifada.
Yes.
This isn't just about a genocidal chant. There's a call to violence, and again, which crosses over into conduct. I don't think that students are so fragile that words should be outlawed because it may, cause their ears to bleed. This has crossed that line. And one of the things that was actually disappointing, at least against about the portion of the congressional hearing that I saw, is they didn't talk about that. It really was just about, okay, your litmus test is bad. Will you subscribe to mine?
Yes. So the question is, where do we try to get the Jewish community to do? And, we've talked about this before, about whether to change DEI or ban DEI or engage DEI. I'm very skeptical of engaging DEI because I think it just reinforces the ideological framework. Again, are there exceptions to DEI, bad DEI, crazy DEI programs? Probably. I don't think many at university level, though. I think most university level DEI programs are batshit crazy. It's the term I use. What would be easier, to reform DEI, as Ibu Patel suggests, or to try to get it to ban it? And that's an interesting question. University of Oklahoma, in a red state, once just banned it this last week. You're seeing that at Florida and Texas and the like. I'm glad they're banning it, but I also wonder if we should diversify our portfolio and try to transform it in certain places as well. What do you think?
I think first we need to state what the goal is, because what I've seen is that many people in at least the American Jewish community want to be added to and to be covered under DEI. And the argument is always, well, we've been subjected to racism, anti-Semitism, oppression also. If the purpose of DEI is to only include those peoples or groups of peoples that have been subjected to any type of oppression, then it's rotten.
Yes.
That right there is kind of to me the determining factor in whether you reform it or get rid of it. If the purpose is only to sit there and perpetuate the oppressor versus oppressed binary, scrap it.
Right. So it's not really a cooperative enterprise it's inherently alienating, because you're saying that by joining the fray on that, you're basically arraying the Jewish community with other groups against sort of the dominant group in society, and it becomes immediately conflict-ridden model. It's not a social model that will actually bring people together and make society a better place for everybody. And I think that's its fatal flaw. And I think that's what's doing. I would also argue that that the Jewish community, probably there are a lot of people in the Jewish community said, yeah, that would be great if DEI would go away. That's not going to happen anytime soon, or it's not going to change. So, and I've heard this before, why not good cop, bad cop? Okay, well, there'll be good cops. We engage DEI and try to get them to include anti-Semitism because it may not go away. And the bad cops can try to oppose it or transform it. And I think that good cop, bad cop is a cop out. And the reason I think it's a cop out is ultimately what's going to happen is that all of the mainstream Jewish organizations cluster around engaging DEI. Everybody will try to do it. Why? Because everybody wants to be the good guy. So that leaves us, like us schmageggies of the Jewish Institute for Liberal Values, to fight this alone. You're going to make us do all the bad guy stuff while you guys, cozy up to university DEI administrators and try to sell them on the Jewish narrative. I think that's terrible. And that's why I think what we're trying to do post October 7th, the October 8th Jew and the October 8th Jewish community, is to shift the center of gravity away from everybody being the good guy to much more of it being, many of us have to be the bad guy here. And I worry that the mainstream Jewish institutions are looking for excuses to do everything that they've always done, say, yes, this was a terrible moment, and they're still deer in headlights. I haven't seen anybody in the mainstream leadership really articulate publicly a robust strategy for changing the way we do business. And DEI is going to be one indicator of that. Are they going to keep on doing what they've always done, which is to try to get the Jews in on it? Or are they going to start realizing that below the surface of that iceberg is the ideology that keeps on producing the anti-Semitism in the first place? Are you hopeful at all? You're my house pessimist, so.
No, I'm hopeful because I've seen enough people, even if they're not part of leadership in mainstream organizations, that are just fed up and done, and they want to, move on from this ridiculousness that we've seen over the past few years. So in that sense, I'm hopeful. And then there are, dedicated people that are in smaller Jewish organizations that have been working day and night to combat it. So in that sense, yeah, I am. I just think that I hope that the broader conversation is had looking at what the root of it is. And the root of something like DEI that really only wants to include groups that are so-called oppressed, the root of that is toxic. There isn't if you participate in that, you're feeding it.
Yeah. In about an hour, half an hour, 34 minutes, 1 p.m. Eastern time, we are going to have a forum with people from NCRI, the National Contagion Research Institute. They issued a joint report with ISCAP, the Institute for the Study of Global Anti-Semitism Policy, on Qatari money and the role Qatari money plays in reinforcing both illiberalism and anti-Semitism on campus. And so if you ask me, what are the things that we can do? We got to marginalize DEI in a big way on campus. We've got to marginalize Qatari funding. That happened, by the way, with Saudi funding. Saudi is not nearly the player that used to be on campuses, and it understood that it was risking its relationship with the American people if it continued to fund these horrible programs. The Qataris picked up where the Saudis left off. And the third thing that I think we need to do, and there are other things as well, but the third thing that I think we need to do is we need to start creating new departments and institutes on campuses that represent free inquiry. The University of North Carolina has done this. Yale Law School, which has been a terrible place for free inquiry, has actually established a new institute. I think some of those billionaire donors that are angry at the universities and are removing their money, I'd like to see them use some of that money toward establishing new academic institutes that would where there was free inquiry. Now, why shouldn't all the university be an institution of free inquiry? It should be, but it's not. And if we create these competing bodies, I think that they could eventually, this is my theory, I can't prove it, eventually they would attract the best student talent, the best professor talent, and they would start to overshadow those crazy academic departments. What do you think about that idea?
I think it's brilliant. I mean, imagine a center for the Jewish Institute for Liberal Values. That'd be wonderful.
Yeah, maybe we could start with YU, Yeshiva University. Maybe they'll establish the JILV Institute at YU. So, I think we've got a big challenge. It's a generational challenge. We ain't going out of business anytime soon. I always said that, if we succeed and go out of business, I'll find something else to do. But Brandy, I think we're in it for the long haul, because this is going to be a huge challenge in the coming years at higher education level, in K through 12 education level, which you're obviously at the forefront of. We have a lot of work to do, and I'm thankful to do it with some wonderful colleagues, especially you. So, all right. Well, look, it's 12:28. I've got a 12:30 call. Shabbat Shalom, Brandy.
Shabbat Shalom.
And wishing you all well. Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Thanks so much.
Thank you.